Hey you guys, what's going on? It's your boy Nate. Thank you and welcome back to part two. So if you haven't seen part one, I'd highly recommend watching that video. I just made a video on basic training. It was supposed to be a video about my entire experience in the military, but really hard to do that in one video. So I want to break this up into parts. This part is part two. It's going to be focusing primarily on advanced individual training, which is after your initial, sign up, reception, basic training process. So again, if you haven't seen part one, I highly recommend checking it out. If you are interested in how that whole initial process works and basic training, I know a lot of people are, but if you're just kind of bored of basic training videos, and I get it, there's a lot out there. You don't have to watch it, but again, everybody's experience is a little unique. I think it's neat to hear those different experiences. So it really helps you to grasp what this is going to be about. So part two, guys, advanced individual training. Now, everybody's advanced individual training experience is going to be pretty different. In fact, I'd say more so than basic training. Now, the reason for that, one, the Army in particular has about 150 jobs that you can, I believe it's about 150 jobs you can do on the enlisted side. So mine in particular, I chose the military intelligence route. So after basic training, after I was done at Fort Sill, I was flown to Fort Huachuca in Arizona, which is outside of Sierra Vista, which I believe is, from what I remember, it's about an hour from Tucson, if you know where that is. I think a couple hours from Phoenix, something like that. So Fort Huachuca, guys, AIT. So one thing I want to let you guys know before I go into my experience is when it comes to AIT and your job. So what I would say the hardest part of your military career is behind you, especially if you're just going into the conventional, which is what we call the conventional Army, right? Unless you're going special forces, 18 X-ray contracts, Green Berets, things like that. I would say the hardest part of your military training is behind you. Advanced individual training, guys, is pretty easy. You get a lot of privileges you did not get in basic training. But AIT, guys, I just want to let you guys know, do your research. Like, this goes back to even before, like, talking to your recruiter. If I knew what I know now, I would have never, let me backtrack on that. I loved what I did. I truly did. I loved my job. I learned so much. It was what I wanted to do then. Met a lot of incredible people, got a lot of incredible experiences, got to go to several locations and do a lot of training with a lot of groups. It was awesome. Okay, I loved it. But if I knew what I know now, I would have done a lot more research on the jobs I could choose from. Like I said, about 100, 150 to choose from. And so you really should look into those. Okay, one, definitely study for the ASVAB, which is your test. Do the best you can, and then go on the Army's website. You can actually look at all the individual jobs and see what scores you would need for the individual jobs. And so really find something that you're going to enjoy. And this is primarily important for active duty, but it's extremely important for everybody, because you're going to be doing this job for either the next, if you're active duty, as few as maybe 3 years, if you're National Guard Reserves, 6 years, and you have to remember that if you deploy, especially in the National Guard or Reserves, you're going to be doing this job full time. So definitely pick something that you enjoy. I understand certain circumstances, some people just might be trying to get out of a bad situation. They might just want to get the first job that comes up that gets them out of their area. Maybe they have to provide for a family. I totally get it. Everybody is important in the military. Every single job has its purpose. Every single member, every individual job and job specification has a purpose and a reason. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. That being said, just know with certain jobs, and it really depends on where you get stationed, depends who your leadership is, depends who your unit is, depends on a lot of different things. It's going to depend on what you actually do with your job. You got to remember, guys, in the military, a lot of times you are going to be doing things that aren't necessarily job specific or job related. Okay, if you've ever heard the joke about Motor Pool Monday, Mondays. Okay, a lot of units do that. Mondays are spent checking vehicles, making sure everything's up to date, making sure there's no deficiencies, making sure everything's running smoothly and correctly, right? You have a lot of days where you're laying out things with your supply. You're making sure everything is up to date, everything's accounted for, right? You're making sure everything's going smoothly. Now, certain jobs are going to be doing that a lot more than others. So, for instance, if you are in like the medical field, you're probably going to be doing, of course, it depends on what job, because there's a lot of medical jobs. A lot of medical jobs, you're going to be spending more time in like a hospital or a rehab facility, helping people with injuries, things like that. If you are, for instance, a truck driver, an 88 Mike in the military, I went to basic with a lot of guys who are going to be an 88 Mike truck driver. And the reality is, like, once you go to your unit, yeah, you might be driving around a truck sometimes, but you're going to be doing a lot of that other soldier stuff, right? Unless you deploy, then you're probably going to be doing your job quite a bit. So just keep that in mind, okay? Do your research, like really figure out what job best suits you. Think long term, okay, what would I enjoy? There's a lot of different jobs out there, guys. A lot of different jobs like you would love to do, but really try to pick the one that you can really wrap your head around and think that you can enjoy, okay? That might mean you need to wait a little bit longer. Let's say you go to MEPS, you choose this job, they say, hey, we can't ship you out for another 4 months. Okay, well, you got to be prepared for that too. Also be prepared if you're just wanting to go as soon as possible. You might not get that opportunity. You might have to choose whatever they say is available. A lot of times it's going to be like supply jobs, infantry jobs, maintenance jobs, things like that, which are great. They're phenomenal jobs. You just have to be prepared for that. So do your research, know what you're getting yourself into, try to watch some videos, read some forums online, but just understand that everybody's going to have a slightly different experience, okay? So AIT, going back to my experience. For Huachuca, it was about 4 months of training. I went in mid-October. So TRADOC, which is like I call it training land, always normally takes off the last week of December, first week of January. So you get 2 weeks off for Christmas. So during that training period I was in, I had like literally halfway through, I got to go home for 2 weeks for Christmas. Okay, we had to schedule our flights. We had to make sure everything was good to go. And we just got to come home. I chilled with my family and friends for 2 weeks. Just make sure you guys don't smoke weed or do drugs, because they're going to drug test you when you come back. They say that 1,000 times. People are stupid. They still do it, and then they pop hot, and then they get kicked out, or they get some pretty bad stuff on the record. It's just not worth it, guys. So AIT, guys, honestly, when I first got there, it was really chill. It was actually a lot more chill than I thought it was going to be. Fort Huachuca, from what I remember, I loved it. I love arid areas. It was like kind of the middle of the desert. Mountains. I could look out my window. It's on the 3rd story of a barracks, and I could just see mountains, okay? When I first got there, I had one roommate. By the time I left there, I think I had like 2 or maybe 3 roommates. They had to just pile us in rooms, so you had like a bunk bed. We had to end up making bunk beds because of how many people we had at one point, but it's cool. A lot of these people you were with in basic training, and everything's kind of chilled out. When I first got there, I think it was a Saturday, so we had process, and they told us, hey, just make sure you guys stay in like a battle buddy group, because you're still in training land, but you guys can go to anywhere that's pretty much on base. You can go to the PX, you can buy food, like snacks, you can buy things you might need. Let's say you ran out of some personal items, let's say you want to get different personal items, like things become a lot more lax. You don't have to have a certain type of razor or things like that. Very chill, more chill in basic training. So Fort Huachuca was very well kept. I wish, and again, going back, if I had to do it all over again, would I have done the National Guard? Well, I really wanted to do the National Guard, so honestly, I'd probably, hindsight's always 20/20. If I had to do it all over again, I'd probably do full-time first. That's just me. Knowing what I know now. But knowing what I knew then, The National Guard was perfect, but Fort Huachuca was amazing. I wish I could go there outside of the training umbrella because there was so much hiking to do. There were so many different things you could do, but they restricted so much to people who were in training. So still had fun. Like you could go bowling, you could go to like the movies. Movies were cheap. You could get a movie for like $5. Popcorn was like $1. I mean, it was super cheap. It was awesome. They didn't always have a huge selection of movies, but hey, I mean, it was cool. You know, you go with your battle buddies. You know, a lot of walking if you didn't want to pay for taxis, so you got a lot of walking. And yeah, that first weekend when I was there, guys, was chill. Just kind of settled in. You were in a room. You shared a bathroom. Very similar to like a nice college like dorm, I guess is the way to put it. You had drawers. You had a little locker with some drawers. Things were pretty quiet. You know, you don't have drill sergeants running up and down the hallway screaming at everybody unless someone really screws up, and then you have sergeants that come up over the radio, over the intercom, and they're like, hey guys, like everybody outside their doors, or everybody outside to the drill pad, things like that. But really just chilled out that weekend, guys. Took it easy, slept, ate. I actually gained, goodness, I think it was one of my heaviest in my life after basic training. After basic, I was pretty lean and mean. After about a month of AIT, I put on some weight. I remember I was eating everything because like my metabolism was super high. You're still PTing every morning in AIT, and I blimped up to like maybe 220, 225. Right now I'm sitting at about 200, and it wasn't the good kind of 220 either. Like you could see it in my face. My face was puffy. It was, yeah, I put on a lot of weight. I didn't feel good either. My PT was going down, and so I figured out I had to cut out a lot of the extra carbs and bread and sweets and all that. Get my diet in check. But that's probably gonna happen to a lot of people, especially if you're very, very hungry after basic. So that Monday, honestly, we started up similar to basic. You wake up, we woke up like 5:15. You had to be at the nearby. There was like a football field where we all got information for PT. We did that for about an hour every morning. We usually went straight to breakfast after, which was like a 5-10 minute walk or march there. Breakfast was pretty cool. Breakfast was pretty good at Fort Huachuca. Weekends were even better because you got to make your own like special omelets. But breakfast was good. The food there was pretty good quality. The only thing I wish they would have had more of is just a bigger food selection, but the quality was pretty good. I mean, every day was something slightly different. Most days of the week you'd have different themes of food. So like Sundays it was pretty cool. You could have like, they would make steaks and shrimp. At least in the training environment, I can't remember exactly how it worked, and I know it's different for enlisted and officer, but basically you sign in, you go through the line at the DVAC, and then you are, you know, on your way. You can go to the salad bars and all that. You're not having to march. Like in basic, you had to march, everything was super crazy. Like you had to eat in 10 minutes. You could sit down with like who you wanted to sit down with. You could eat, you know, you just had to make sure that you were back in formation at a certain time. So you got to eat for like 20 or 30 minutes instead of 10 minutes, which was awesome. But yeah, it was cool. Then we would march. Goodness, the marching was one of the craziest parts. So Fort Huachuca, at least where I was, the way that they had everything structured. Apparently, back in the day, there was a rumor. I can't remember. Again, this has been like 8 years at this point. There was like buses. They used to take people that would take the recruits to their classroom. So basically, from like 8 to 5, 8 hours a day, you're in a classroom. We would march from our barracks to the classroom, which took like 20 minutes, maybe something like that. It was like 20, 25 minutes. It would took one way. The whole time we're singing cadence, we're sounding off, we're in step and all this stuff. And, we're going up hills. I mean, it gets you in pretty good shape. You get a lot of walking in, which is cool. The weather was pretty decent there too. Very dry, loved it. In the middle of the day, it could get really hot, but then at night and in the morning, it cooled down quite a bit. I loved the environment, honestly. I mean, I love Arizona. Just want to throw that out there. Beautiful place. Beautiful place. But once after that was done, the marching, we just, go to our classes. We'd be split up in little classrooms. We'd go over all the stuff we're supposed to learn. Our instructors were pretty cool. We had tests. I remember my first test, I failed it because I didn't do something right. I didn't put a certain amount of pictures in PowerPoint, and it thankfully wasn't a huge deal, but it was one of those things where I was like, really, if I just would have paid attention a little bit more. And every test that we took, there was 4 big tests at the time. Every test was a little bit different, and they got, for most people, I think the second to last test was the hardest. But I actually started out kind of weird, so my tests were getting better and better and better. So the first test I took, like I said, I kind of failed, which there was actually 5 tests. That first test was more of a pre-test, and then the 4 tests were the main tests for your curriculum. You would do that it was about once every month to 3 weeks, because it was about 4 months of training. So you take a big test every 3 weeks, and then my test scores were getting better and better. I remember at one point I was about halfway through, I was real discouraged because the curriculum was really tough, and I just remember being discouraged. And I remember talking to my family. I'm like, yeah, I don't really know if this is going to be for me. If I fail this or whatever, then I could get kicked out of the army, and I could get reclassed into something I don't want to do. And they're like, just stick to it. I know you got this. And so, yeah, I never failed the test. After that first one, I just went through it. I went to they offered, you can go to extra classroom training after if you're struggling or if you want to. I ended up going to those things, and then by the end, I remember a couple times I went just to help out a couple of my buddies, and that was really cool because I learned at that point in my life, the best way to learn something is to be able to turn around and teach it. So if you can turn around and teach something, you know the material really, really well. And when I started going to kind of help out other people, that's when I really took off, and that's when everything just became crystal clear. And like I said, my test scores just kept going up. So I was very thankful, very grateful. God was very good to me. So after, class in the morning, we would usually go to lunch. We have to march back to the chow hall for lunch. We'd have to get information after. Lunch was pretty rushed. It was you get there, you go in, you eat. It's usually from what I remember, is the busiest time of day too, because everybody's in there for lunch. There's a lot of different training cycles on the base, a lot of different other intelligence jobs going on, and so you come out. Now they're not drill sergeants, like I said. Our sergeants, I think they had a specific name to them, but our sergeants are, they were something. They were pretty cool. I remember one of them was really pissed off a lot of the time and would get really upset at us, and she would smoke us a lot, which was crazy. Thinking back on it, I don't know what was going on in her personal life. I'd heard a couple of things, but yeah, you never know. It's the military. And again, the sergeants who are over you, they have to make sure everybody is at a certain place at a certain time. If they screw up, they get in huge trouble. Their superiors get in huge trouble. Also, this is so I was very oblivious to a lot of stuff early on in my life, and then especially during basic training. I grew up with goody two-shoes in a lot of ways. So you're going to start learning the term fraternization a lot in AIT. I kid you not, people were caught having sex in some of the dumpsters. People could not keep their stuff in their pants. They had to, go out with people. People were coming back to formation late. I remember one time because they were off doing who knows what, and it was crazy. They were on you. They were on you. It was lax, but you had to be at the right place at the right time. You couldn't do stupid stuff. I remember one guy, he vaped. He got a vape. And again, you're in these little college dorm style rooms. This guy hotboxed his room, and this was a soldier that I went through basic training with from a different platoon. And he was a pretty squared away dude in basic, pretty serious. Once he got to AIT, guys, and this is one of the things you got to remember, you can't be too lax on yourself. You got to keep that soldier, you got to keep that disciplined mindset. A few of the soldiers, him included, he just, once he got to AIT, he felt like he just let off the gas, became a completely different person. I saw people's personalities 180 from basic to AIT. I remember going through with guys who were crying, who were scared, who were totally different people in basic, and then in AIT, they became the complete opposite. Like some people, like you get confidence. Don't get me wrong, that's a part of it. But these guys went from like one extreme to the other. They became just straight up like douchebags, and they just didn't give a crap about what anybody could tell them. The sergeants couldn't tell them anything. They thought because they had a little bit of freedom, they took that little bit of freedom and ran a mile with it. And they lost respect for other people. They started acting like they're the shit and that they're the best thing that's ever happened to anybody around them. It was really strange to see how some people change. And but the cool thing is, a lot of people, they got better as soldiers. I remember at that time, some of the most amazing soldiers that I ever met were soldiers that I would have never, like, up until that point in my life, I grew up pretty sheltered. I loved people from all different walks of life. I loved people who were coming from all different sorts of backgrounds, but I'd never really been around them a whole lot until I was in the Army. And like, you have to depend on those people to your left and right. You have to trust them. You get to know them. Like, you get to know a lot about people and their backgrounds, and it was just awesome to see, just what people from all these different backgrounds, all these different beliefs, all these different things, what you could come together and do. And anyway, so yeah, just make sure you guys stay disciplined. But once we got back from chow, we marched back to the schoolhouse in the middle of the afternoon, and then you go for another like 3 to 4 hours, and then you get released. You come out of the classroom, you march to chow, and then usually, and this is the weird thing, the first half of my training so at the end of 2016, the first half of training was actually a lot more chill than the last half for AIT. So for me, it flip-flopped. That should not be the case for people. You should start out a little strict, and then towards the end, you should be able to have a little bit more freedom and leeway. Something happened with on base. I think we had a change of command, and then we had some different things happen. So initially when we first started, like I said, our days were pretty chill. We'd PT, we'd have some time to eat, we'd come back. It was very like on you to do your own thing. At nighttime, like I said, after we get marched back to our barracks, it was like 17:30 at night. And then we would have a little bit of here's some mail, here's some announcements, do your own thing. By 5:45 p.m. at night, guys, you were pretty much done. Like, you could pretty much do whatever you want. You could go to the PX, you could go to the gym, you could go to Taco Bell, you could go to the little shopping strips. You could pretty much do whatever you wanted to on base. Now, this is kind of weird. So in AIT, at least for my AIT, there was different phases because it was a pretty long AIT. The longer your AIT is, normally the better. You get a lot more freedoms and you get treated more like humans. The shorter it is, the worse. I had kind of a weird one. Mine was about 4 months. A lot of people's AIT is about 2 months. A lot of AITs in the military are about 2 to 3 months. And then you have the other extreme, which you can get into like the 6 months to a year, okay? I was like kind of right in the middle. So what I think happened, because a lot of it's just speculation. There's so many things that can happen in the military, but when AIT first started for me, like I said, very free. You could kind of do your own thing. You were able to just be at the right place at the right time. You were good. You had free time after you were done at night. Just make sure you were there for the last bed check at night. You had to stand outside your room with your CAT card, and it was usually bed check was at like 9:30 or something like that. You go to bed, you sleep for 8 hours, you wake up, you go to PT, you do it all over again, right? Pretty chill, pretty chill. for the most part. Something happened, guys. I can't remember what. I think soldiers were getting in trouble. We had some issues with another. There was another training group entirely. Wasn't even in our building. They got caught doing something dumb, so they were like punished. They had to wear their dress uniforms everywhere they went, which isn't the most comfortable thing. And you really want to make sure you don't mess up your dress uniform at all. But then like that trickles out to the other training groups, and then because of one person's mistake, everybody gets a little bit of that backlash. And so what ended up happening was, for some reason, I remember things just got way more strict and complicated. So I'm trying to make sure I'm keeping this as like sequential, like in order as possible. Because like I said, the first half of AIT seemed really chill. After Christmas and New Year's is when things got really like strict. So as you go through AIT, for us, there was 3 phases. There was black, gold, and green phase. Black phase, you're pretty much just a soldier right out of basic. You don't really get a whole lot of privileges. You have to wear your uniform everywhere you go. Gold phase is pretty cool. Gold phase is really the one that everybody like really want. You get to wear civilian clothes when you're off duty. You get to, on the weekends, you can, I think you guys would go within a certain radius off base. Maybe that was only green phase, but gold phase, you had a lot of privileges. I just remember like the fact you could wear civilians, the fact that you could do these other like extra things were just, it was great. Green phase, you could actually, for the soldiers who really wanted to travel. Now you gotta remember, a lot of times guys in the military, you have a pretty decent amount of money, and I'm gonna get into that here in a little bit, but a lot of times soldiers will blow their money. Clothing, food, like food that you don't need, and then also travel. So you could also, in our AIT, you couldn't have a car, but you could pay taxis to take you places. Well, gold phase, I think you could go to a certain radius outside of the base. Green phase, you go like even further, and then you had some other, or you had, before they changed it when I was in, they had other things. Like green phase used to be amazing. Green phase, oh my gosh, green phase was like, you didn't have to go to bed checks, or at least on the weekends, you didn't have to worry about bed checks. You just had to be a PT. Very chill. You could go very far off base. You could go as far as I think Phoenix, which was like 2 hours away. There was a radius, but it was an awesome phase. Well, again, I don't know what happened, but like by the time everybody in our group got to gold phase, unless you really screwed up and you lost your phase, you were, well, like I said, you were chilling. Like I remember one point, probably wasn't the best thing in the world. You couldn't drink. Back, I know years and years ago in AIT, if you were of age, you could drink, but now you can't do that in TRADOC. But they used to have these little smoke pits. So they used to have these little like metal roofs, some little picnic tables, ashtrays and things like that, used to be able to smoke. So like I never really liked, especially when I was in the military and TRADOC, like I didn't like using a whole lot of nicotine because I couldn't use it like all day. But sometimes at night on the weekends, I go out there with some of my buddies, and it'd be like a party, it'd be like a club. People were wearing their civilian clothes. They had like hip hop blasting. You had, again, you couldn't drink, but people were, they had sodas. People were smoking a ton of cigarettes, a ton of cigars. So it was fun. Like, it was as much fun as you could have being like 19 in the military and trained environment, right? Well, once we got gold phase, by the time we're getting to green phase, because it was about 16 weeks of training, so I think it was like every 5 weeks you got like an extra phase. Like after about 5 weeks you got gold phase, and then after another 5 weeks you're supposed to get green phase. But by the time we were supposed to get green phase, something happened. Like I said, people get in trouble. I don't know what was going on, and we were like punished. So green phase, the only like upside to green phase became you could go like further. You could go to like Phoenix or something. That was pretty sure, from what I recall, like the only thing. They stripped away all these other extras that green phase had. It became more of like a social status, like, oh, I have green phase. At one point they like took away a lot of people's green phases to make a point about something. it was weird. It was really strange. A lot of things were changing. I think when I was in towards the end of my training, they started to ban the smoke pits. So, like, you couldn't go and smoke at the smoke pits. TRADOC was being weird about like nicotine usage and all this stuff. I think there was a rumor going around that there was complaints about because these smoke pits were, you know, decent ways away from like barracks and living quarters, but I guess people were complaining about either, who knows what, either about soldiers not acting disciplined enough or the noise or something was going on. And so like the only people that could use those smoke pits were like people who were graduated, who were like actually using nicotine, who were actually smoking. So weird environment. But the second half of AIT, guys, was very weird. Besides the phase part, things started coming down on us hard. So I, again, don't know what happened. But at one point, especially, it was really rough for a few weeks, because I remember it seemed like we were waking up earlier. We weren't allowed to go to sleep until later. At one point, I felt like I was only getting maybe 6.5 hours of sleep a night. For me, I need about 7 minimum to run. So I was running a little bit low. Started to drink some caffeine, which I don't really like to do, because I was just so tired. I was almost like falling asleep in class. And when we were getting marched back at nighttime, like I said, we were getting off like 5:45 most days. So it was really cool. You had like 3.5, 4 hours of free time most days. Well, that came to a screeching halt. And so we were, again, what would happen is we would get back, we would get marched to dinner, which was weird. Then by the time we were done with dinner and came back to the drill pad and had all the mail and everything done, we were released at like 7 o'clock at night. Which, you know, every hour, every 30 minutes, every minute you get a free time is like huge. So the fact that we were getting all this stripped away and we ended up with only, you know, an hour and a half, 2 hours of free time, a lot of people were feeling very trapped. People started getting really depressed. People started getting just pissed off at everything. Morale started to go down. There's a lot of reasons. Again, people were getting in trouble. People, again, proving a point. You know, the cadre, the sergeants over you, they have to prove a point. It was just weird. It was weird. And I think that there was something about how at nighttime, especially for dinner chow, a lot of people were buying their food and eating dinner like in their rooms, preparing meals, things like that, which is great, right? You would think. But in the eyes of the Army at that time, maybe because it was the training environment, they said, well, because they're in a training environment, they have to be getting like 3 meals a day from the chow hall because of the way that they ration out the amount of food, because they have all this like information on like when you use your meal card, like your dining facility card, like everything's tracked a certain way. And so like we were getting in trouble for not going to eat dinner. And so they told us, like, you're gonna go to dinner, like we're gonna march you to dinner, you're gonna like put your number down, that way they have that mark. I don't know, it was a lot of administrative stuff. It was just weird. And so by the time we graduated, it was strange, it was great. I was glad to get out of there. I think our cadre was just having to do a lot of stuff that people over them were being told to tell them. A lot of changes, a lot of like administrative things, but that's the military, guys. At the end of my AIT, there was a little like FTX. So you have a little like week out in the field. For us, it was like 4 days. It wasn't a whole lot. We pulled 12-hour shifts. I think I was night shift, so I had to stay up during the nighttime. Coming back after that, really AIT chills out a lot. You just end up cleaning a lot of your gear. You chill in the classroom quite a bit. You're just going over some last minute stuff, being told about how the Army works. Your instructors have chilled out. You've chilled out. Everything's chill. You know, it's really chill after that. I remember you have to do some medical things. I remember I was super tired after the FTX, and I slept for, I slept for probably the longest I've ever slept in my life. I can't remember how long it was. It was like 18 hours or 6. It was a lot. Like I slept a lot. But we had like a 4-day weekend coming up, which was cool. In AIT, depending on when you go, you can get a lot of 4-day weekends. So if you got a holiday coming up, You can get off Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, which is cool because you can just kind of do what you want. You can lay around, you can sleep, you can watch YouTube, you can go to the movies, you can go eat. I mean, just you kind of do what you want. But I was glad for it to be over. Graduation ceremony, family came to pick me up. We drove all the way back to Texas. That was pretty much it for AIT, guys. The sergeants at the end, you know, the one that I was really pissed off at everybody and everything, I remember telling her, because I could tell that she cared, and it was really interesting to see like her demeanor change. I told her, I was like, hey Sergeant, I really appreciate you, helping all of us recruits through. And I felt like crazy saying this because I knew the type of person that she was, and she could take this as like sarcasm or whatever, but she didn't. And her whole demeanor changed. She went from like this super like stout, like super just like strict sergeant to this very sweet, very appreciative, very, very kind. And I was like, you know what? I don't know what's going on in their life. I don't know what's going on, but I hope that had an impact on her. And I think it did. And so it was cool to see that. It was cool to see people with their families. Some people, one of the things, guys, in AIT, so AIT is kind of the turning point for a lot of people. You got to be careful in AIT because especially once you start doing stupid things, like if you get caught with caffeine at certain times of the day, like you could only have caffeine like if you were on a break in the schoolhouse, like outside. You could only have nicotine, like I said, after the day was over, things like that. You had to be really careful. You couldn't have certain items on you. They would still do shakedowns. They would still make sure that you weren't being stupid during the day. Depending on your job, for us, we couldn't have our phones in the day, so we have to turn our phones, or I think we just leave them at our barracks. And a lot of times we wouldn't even get our phones till the end of the day. So again, that's just life. That's the job you signed up for. And just make sure you don't do anything stupid. I remember making some stupid choices in AIT. One time in particular, one morning we had this thing called Nerf PT in our barracks. It was really cool. We got to run around, shoot Nerf guns at each other. A couple of my buddies were like, hey man, like we don't need to do this. We can just go back to our barracks and sleep. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. So we went back. I don't even think I really slept, but I remember like feeling more rested, getting up, going, man, I'm glad I did that. Long story short, someone ratted us out. Sergeants found out that a lot of people did that. And at the end of that day, of one of the days, they said, if you don't tell us, we're gonna single you out. You're gonna be in more trouble because we have video cameras, which turns out that wasn't necessarily true. And so I ratted on myself. I was like, yeah, one of them was me. And I remember for the upcoming weekend, or maybe 2 weekends in a row, I had to do like extra duty, so I didn't really get a weekend or 2 weekends. I had to do from like 9 to 5, 9 to 6. I had to do a bunch of extra duties. So like literally the dumb stuff you see people doing in the military, that's what I did. I swept the track. I swept the sunshine off the running track. Swept the drill pad 1,000 times. Took out a bunch of trash, cleaned a bunch of areas, did a bunch of dumb stuff basically. And yeah, guys, that's what happens when you screw up. Our what we call our PG, he was like the recruit. He was like one of us trainees that was like in charge of our group, and he would usually get a little bit more privileges, a little bit more leeway with the sergeants and stuff. But I think he was one of them that decided to go to, whatever. And I remember he was a super confident guy, very charismatic, very just solid leader. And I remember after that, he was like in our group. I guess he got in trouble for something. I think it could have been something different he got in trouble for, and his whole demeanor changed. Like he became very, I don't know if he had some personal stuff going on, but he wasn't as confident as he used to be. He just kind of started, again, I think second guessing himself and just kind of lost his confidence. And so you always want to make sure you make the right choices, guys, because it could come back to bite you. I knew guys, like they didn't fess up to it. They didn't get in trouble. No one ever found out, but you know, at that point you're essentially lying. You gotta, you know, be able to live with yourself, and to each their own. So, you know, the Army is very big on integrity. That's one of the core values. You gotta be, because like, if you're not, those little things are gonna affect you forever, and that could get someone hurt, killed. And so you got to make sure that you're squared away. Always make sure that you're squared away, trying to do the right thing. There's no shame in being a goody two-shoes in the military, guys. If you're not, it could haunt you for the rest of your life. It really, really could. So, guys, AIT, it was great. It was weird. It was all over the place. I had a very unique, I think, overall experience with my basic training and AIT experience. And that girl I was telling you all about in basic training, that we ended up finding out, like, we ended up in the same unit. We ended up finding out that we went to basic training on the same day. She was at another battery. She was actually at another battery for AIT as well. We were in the same job. Never saw her. I don't recall her ever there. It's just funny to like actually for us to start talking about that, find out that, oh, like, we actually were like training just in completely different environments, and our stories and our experiences and our recaps are totally different. She would have a totally different story for you guys if you ever, you know, get to hear her story. So really, really neat, guys. The Army can be a fun place. It's always changing, always be adaptable. But guys, if you got any questions, comments, please let me know below. Feel free to give me a like, subscribe. There's gonna be more where this came from. And that concludes part 2. Part 3 is gonna be a little bit different. So part 3 is gonna be my experience in the National Guard afterwards. And I'm probably gonna do some parts after as well on, you know, some things I wish I would have known. But as far as my experience goes, AIT, like I said, it was fun all the way through. A lot of it was just monotonous. But it was fun. You know, you made a lot of good memories, and every AIT is going to be a little bit different. So guys, thanks for watching, and stay tuned for part 3.